That indicates the inferior status which women had in the society. Women had no freedom during this period and were kept secluded. The Parda system existed both among the Muslims and the Hindus. Women were kept in the Janana. Women kept in the Janana or separate apartments outside which they were not allowed to appear except in Parda. Amir Khusro was court poet of Alauddin Khilji. He advised to his daughter, asked her not to leave the thread of the spinning wheel and always to keep her face towards the wall of the house. Amir Khusro advised his daughter not to leave the thread of the spinning wheel and always to keep her face towards anytime the wall of the house and her back towards the door, so that nobody would be able to look at her. Muslim women were not allowed to visit the tombs of holy men outside the city. The practice of sati and jauhar were widely prevalent. These sacrifices of women were admired. Amir Khusro described sati as a noble practice. Evidence Ibn Battuta witnessed the sati on many occasions and gives details of such sacrifices.
Sir, what is Johar practice, sir?
Johar means totally women's sacrifices in fire. అగ్నిలోకి దూకి మరణించడం. అగ్నిగుండం ఉంటది కదమ్మా. Yes, this system only at the time of Rajput kingdom. The Johar system introduced in Rajput age and continued to Delhi Sultanate period also. Okay?
Okay, sir. Sati means burning the woman alive after the death of the husband.
Yes, yes, very good. Yes.
Okay, sir.
భర్తతో పాటు భార్య కూడా మరణించడం.
Okay, sir.
This is society, socio conditions of Delhi Sultanate period. Next subheading is economic conditions. Economic conditions, ఆర్థిక పరిస్థితి. The economic system of the Delhi Sultanate was a feudal in nature. The nobility who owned vast lands and great social prominence because of their economic prosperity. The village was the basic economic unit. It was a self-sufficient system and production in the village was largely for local consumption. The technique and instruments of production were primitive, but they served the purpose of limited production. The craftsmen in the villages were organized into distinct professions. In course of time, gradually town began to flourish. With the increase in towns, production in villages increased and internal trade expanded. In the towns also, artisans lived and production was carried on. Certain towns specified in the production of goods for export. The towns in Gujarat and Bengal produced a variety of textile like white cotton, silk, velvet, satin, and quilts. The Kambe cotton, during this period, the Kambe cotton was famous for its quality and cheapness. Every town had a marketplace, a 100-page number, a place where merchants and consumers gathered. Fairs were held regularly for purpose of trade in the course of his travels in India. Ibn Battuta came in India 1333 AD. Ibn Battuta found the big cities with rich markets in the Gangatek Valley, Malwa, Gujarat, Bengal, Deccan, and Malabar. Among all the sultans of Delhi, Alauddin Khilji showed much interest in economic matters. He introduced a number of reforms in the economic space. Alauddin Khilji, the most important reform was control of prices. Dharala Niyantrana. He fixed the prices of all the commodities and took effective steps to see that the merchants sold the goods only at the prices fixed by the government. The objective of his economic reforms was to enable the soldiers to live happily within the salaries which they got. All the merchants had to register their names with the government to carry on trade. Name was Daftar. Name was Daftar. Merchants had registered Daftar. And Alauddin Khilji appointed Diwani Riyasat and Shahnai Mandi officers to maintain the market reforms during this period. The merchants who sold the goods at higher prices and those who did not follow the regulations of the government were severely punished them. Next subheading is agriculture development. According to foreign travelers who visited India during the period agriculture was flourishing in many parts of the country. Food crops, commercial crops, vegetable and fruit gardens were grown in plenty. Ibn Battuta wrote Kitabul Rehla. This text given to the information, the fertility of the soil helped to high production in the agriculture field. The irrigational facilities provided by the rulers also stimulated growth in the agricultural field. A large number of people in villages were dependent on agriculture. Irrigation and public works to improve agriculture, he undertook many irrigational schemes. Canals were dug. The most important of them was 150 miles canals running from the river Yamuna to the city of Isar. About 150 wells were sunk both for irrigation and for the use of travelers. Most of the canals were constructed by Firoz Shah Tughlaq, his Tughlaq dynasty, and wastelands were brought into cultivations. As a result, there was no scarcity of food grains in the state. He protected the interest of the farmers and won the title the friend of the farmers. During this period, the main sources of people land tax. Above all, he was a great builder and a great gardener. He built new cities, buildings, palaces, mosques, schools, hospitals, rest houses, etc. According to Ferishta, he constructed not less than 845 public works. He founded the cities of Jaunpur, Fatehbad, Hisar, Firozabad, etc. Jaunpur and Fatehbad, Hisar, Firozabad had constructed by Firoz Shah Tughlaq. He was a lover of garden too. He restored 30 old gardens of Alauddin and laid 1,200 new gardens in the vicinity of Delhi. These gardens served not only as beauty spots, but also as a sources of income. He brought 2 Ashokan pillars, Meerut and Tofra. Firoz Shah Tughlaq took to Delhi the 2 Ashokan pillars. He brought 2 Ashokan pillars to Delhi. And during this period, very important product wheat at Ganga Tech Valley. Bullock carts, horses, and donkeys are used to transport various commodities, and foreign trades with Southeast Central Asia and China, and also flourished during Delhi Sultanate age. Multan, Sindh, Lahore, Delhi, etc. are important major trade centers. After the conquests, South India by Delhi Sultans also extended their trade into southern region. Jital and Tanka. What is this Jital and Tanka? This is coins. Jital was a copper coin. Tanka is a silver coin. Jital and Tanka were popular currency of the Iltutmish period. From North and South India, textiles, silk, spices are exported to Southeast Asia. The temple economy and resources of South India suffered a serious setback due to the plunder of Turkish forces. This is economic sources, economic conditions. Next, religious. The growth of Islam degraded Hinduism. In order to reform the Hindu values of life, certain religious reformers emerged and preached a devotional form of Hinduism. This is called the Bhakti movement. The Bhakti saints like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Ramananda, Chaitanya, Ramdas, Tukaram, Guru Nanak, and Kabir preached oneness of God and universal brotherhood. We will read about them in detail in another next chapter. The Bhakti movement was a very important topic. We will discuss it later. Next subheading is literature. Literature. The Hindu-Muslim contact gradually resulted in the linguistic synthesis. The languages and concept of Sanskrit origin mingled with Persian, Arabic, and Turkish words. The result was birth of Urdu language. In due course, Urdu became popular with common people due to the Bhakti movement, vernacular language such as Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, and Maithili received great popularity. Common people enjoyed the songs of Bhakti saints. During the age of Delhi Sultanates, a new kind of literature, the all the Delhi Sultans patronized many scholars. It was under his patronage that Barani, Shamsi Siraj, and Amir Khusru, Badauni, many scholars were patronized during this period. And Al-Biruni wrote Kitabul Hind. This text given to the information invasions of Ghazni Muhammad and Kitabul Rehla was written by Ibn Battuta. This text given to the information Muhammad bin Tughlaq, socio-economic and cultural information give to us. And Amir Khusru wrote Tughlaqnama. Amir Khusru wrote Tughlaqnama. Tughlaqnama and Ashika, Tariki-Alai, Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji. This text given to the information the invasions of Alauddin Khilji and life history. And next, another scholar, Ziauddin Barauni, wrote Tariki Firozshahi. This text also given to the information Tughlaq dynasty. These texts were most important during this period. Next, art and architecture. Delhi Sultans, a new kind of art and architecture emerged in the country. The Delhi Sultans and their officials constructed a number of new buildings, mosques, forts, etc. in Delhi, Ajmer, Lahore, and Daulatabad. The significant features of movements of this period are arch and dome. Second one is use of lime and mortar. Third one is use of stone and gypsum. Fourth one is decorations. The Masons, architects from Arabia, Central Asia, and Persia were invited by Delhi sultans to construct the mosques, forts, palaces, etc. The most important mosques of the age are Quwwat ul Islam mosques. Quwwat ul Islam mosques built by Aibak, Qutbuddin Aibak at Delhi. Qutub Minar is an impressive building, and Ferguson regarded it as the most perfect example of a tower known to exist anywhere in the world. The construction work of Qutub Minar at Delhi was started by Qutbuddin Aibak, and it was completed by his trusted officer Iltutmish. Another mosque named Arhadin Ka Jopra. Arhadin Ka Jopra was built by Qutbuddin Aibak at Ajmer. Arhadin Ka Jopra was built by Qutbuddin Aibak at Ajmer. The planning of Qutub Minar was purely Islamic, as it was originally intended to serve as a place for the muezzin to call Muslims to prayer, though. Afterwards, it became famous as a Tower of Victory. Famous as a Tower of Victory. Iltutmish constructed its 4 stores, and it rose to a height of 225 feet. Firoz Shah Tughlaq repaired Qutub Minar and added 2 smaller stories and raised its height to 234 feet. And next, Alauddin Khilji constructed the famous Alai Darwaza. Alauddin Khilji was constructed Alai Darwaza. The famous saint Nizamuddin Auliya Mosque. The city of Siri was also built by Alauddin Khilji. Siri, the city of Siri. The city of Siri was also built by Alauddin Khilji. This is second capital city of Alauddin Khilji. Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq constructed the city of Tughlaqabad. Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq constructed the city of Tughlaqabad. Ibn Battuta praised the beauty of the palaces. He said Sultan used golden bricks in its construction. Muhammad bin Tughlaq constructed the new city named Jahanpana near Daulatabad. Lal Gumbaz building was built by Nasimuddin. Sikandar Lodi Wazir Mubarak Shah constructed Pearl Mosque at Delhi. Sikandar Lodi Wazir Mubarak Shah was constructed Pearl Mosque, Mutyala Masjid. The Pearl Mosque at Delhi. And Sikkim constructed a new city. Name was Agra. Agra city was constructed by Sikandar Lodi in 1504 AD. And Firoz Shah Tughlaq was also, many cities were constructed during this period. Fatehbad, Isar, Janpur. These cities were constructed Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Thus, during the age of Delhi Sultanate, a new type of agriculture known as architecture, and new type of architecture known as Indo-Islamic architecture emerged in India. Delhi Sultans, a new type of architecture known as Indo-Islamic architecture emerged in India. Thus, the impact of Islam led to far-reaching results. Hindu religion, art, literature, and science absorbed Muslim elements. In fact, the very spirit of Hindu culture and Hindu mind were altered. The Muslims reciprocated by responding to the change in every aspect of life. The Muslims became patriotic and began to regard themselves as Indians. This is Delhi Sultanate period. In this chapter, an attempt in made to provide the conditions led to the Arab conquest of Sindhu, the Ghazni and Gori invasions on India. It discussed it in detail how the Delhi Sultanate's power was established at Delhi in 1206 AD by Qutbuddin Aibak. The major achievements of Delhi Sultans between 1206 to 1526 are also covered. The rule of Delhi Sultanate lasted over 3 centuries. Finally, it ended due to the weak successors of Tughlaqs and due to not winning the support of local publics. Babur defeated lost Delhi Sultan Ibrahim Lodi in the first battle of Panipat in April 26 AD and founded Mughal rule at Delhi. The monuments of Delhi Sultanate are standing even today as the symbol of their heritage. This is Delhi Sultanate. Topic is complete. And next, administration system. The Delhi Sultanate administration system. This is very, very important. Another chapter. Administration. The Delhi Sultanate was a theocratic state. Islam was the state religion. All the political institutions derive their authority from Islamic law in conformity with the practice of the age. Energy Sultan of Delhi styled himself as the deputy of the Khalifa, received inventure from him and inscribed his name on the coins. All the sultans of Delhi except Alauddin Khilji and Qutbuddin Mubarak recognized the nominal sovereignty of the Khalifa. First subheading is central government. Central government. A Sultan. The Sultan was the head of the state, and also all the powers were vested in him. He was the chief source of power and justice. His word was the law. He was a despot and nobody questioned him. The real source of his authority was based on military strength. Thus, he was a military despot. Besides, he was also religious, head of the Muslims. Hence, the powers of Caesar and Pope were combined in him. And the next subheading is Council of Ministers. Council of Ministers. The Sultan was assisted by a Council of Ministers. They were Wazir. First one, Wazir. He is a Prime Minister. Among the ministers who assisted the Sultan, he was also sometimes known as Wakil. He was in charge of finance department and was also the head of the entire administration setup. Next subheading is Diwan-e-Arij. Diwan-e-Arij. He is a army minister. He can be compared to the modern defense minister. He had complete administrative control over the army. His duties included recruitment of the defense personnel, fixation of their salaries, providing equipment to the army, and development of the army whenever necessary. And next minister, Diwan-e-Insa. Diwan-e-Insa. He is a royal correspondent. was the minister in charge of the Department of Correspondence and Records of the Royal Courts. All correspondence of the Sultan with the provincial and local governments and foreign governments was carried on under his supervision. Next subheading is Diwani Risalat. Diwani Risalat is a foreign minister for foreign affairs. Next, Sadar us Sadar is a religious endowment and charity. He is a religious and endowment and charity, was another important department in the administrator of the Delhi Sultanate. He supervised the management of religious institutions and also the disbursement of grants and stipends to the ulema, sheikhs, and other holy men. Next, Diwan-e-Qazi is a head of the judiciary. The chief Qazi or the chief justice was also the minister in charge of the Department of Justice, which was known as Diwan-e-Qazi. And next, Diwan-e-Khairat, Department of Charity. This is Department of Charity. Next, Diwan-e-Amir Kohi. This is Department of Agriculture. Next, Diwan-e-Mustakraj. Realization of arrears from collector, etc. In addition, there were some important officers also. Next, Kaizin is a treasurer. And next, Diwani-Barid is a spy. Diwani-Barid is a spy. The ministers were personal servants of the Sultan and held their office as long as the Sultan was pleased with them. Their advice was not binding on the Sultan. Next subheading is provincial government. The empire was divided into a number of provinces. It's called Ikta. They were headed by Muftis. They were headed by Muftis or Walis. There were 23 provinces during the time of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. The provinces was a replica of the central government. Their main duties were to maintain law and order in the province and render military aid to the Sultan if necessary. In the discharge of his duties, the provincial head was assisted by the provincial ministers like Wazir, Ariz, and the Qaz. These provincial ministers and other important officers in the provinces were sometimes appointed directly by the Sultan. The provinces was divided into 6 the provinces divided into 6, each headed by Sikdar, each headed by Sikdar. The Sikdar was the headed by of the Sikh. He was the chief executive head of the Sikh or district and was in charge of the maintenance of the law and order in this territory. Sikh, each Sikh was divided into paraganas. Each Sikh was divided into paraganas. Iktas divided it into Sikh, Sikhs divided into paraganas. Each paragana or kasbah was a group of villages. According to Ibn Battuta, the paragana consisted of about 100 villages. The paragana consisted of about 100 villages. The officials in a paragana were Amil, Musrif, Kajandar, and Kaj. The Amil collected revenues, the Musrif kept accounts, and the Kajandar was in charge of the treasury. The Qazi was the judge. The Kotwal was also an important official in those days in local government. He was the police chief of a town and was vested with important power to maintain law and order in the town. Next subheading is fiscal policy. The state collected 4 kinds of taxes, the levy of which was prescribed by the Muslims law. The 4 taxes were Zakat. One is Zakat. Second one is Kharaj. Third one is Khams. Fourth one is Jizya. The 4 taxes were collected in Delhi Sultanate period. First one, Zakat, Kharaj, Khams, Jizya. The Zakat was a religious tax paid by the Muslims. Please listen carefully, all of you. Zakat means a religious tax paid by the Muslims as an art of piety for the benefit and welfare of their co-religionists. It was collected at the rate of 2.5 of the actual income or property. Next, the Kharaj. Kharaj was the land revenue tax. Kharaj was the land revenue tax, which varied from 10 to 50% of the agriculture produced. It was payable in cash or in kind. Next, Khams. The Khams was the state share of war booty. The Khams was the state share of war booty. Generally, 1/5 collected the taxes acquired in the war was taken as the share of the state. Last one, jizya. The jizya was a tax collected from the Hindus. Jizya was the collected from the Hindus. Next subheading is judicial administration. Judicial administration. The Sultan was the fountain of justice. The Darbar consisted by highest civil and criminal court of justice. Were original as well as appellate cases were heard. Next to the Sultan, the chief Qazi was the highest judicial authority. In the provinces, the governor and the Qazi and the judicial powers. Each towns also had a Qazi. The Shariat or the Muslim law was followed in the administration of justice. The penal code was severe in those days. Capital punishment and physical tortures were frequently awarded as punishments, like cutting of the limbs, driving nails into the body, pouring molten lead into the throat. The such other inhuman punishments were common in those days. Next and last subheading is military organization. The government of the Delhi Sultans depended heavily on their army. The circumstances in which the Sultanate was placed always necessitated the existence of a strong army. Hence, they bestowed much attention on the Turkish model. The military reforms of Alauddin Khilji resulted in the greater centralization of the army. The cavalry was the most important branch of the army of the sultans. It was their superiority in this branch of the army which helped them to win against the Indians. The infantry was the next important branch of the army. Elephants were also used for the next important materials. The army during the Sultanate had no permanent commander-in-chief. The Sultan himself was the commander-in-chief. But whenever an expedition was sent, a commander-in-chief was appointed. For example, Malik Kafur was appointed as the commander-in-chief for the southern expedition by Alauddin Khilji in 1309 to 1316 AD. This is Delhi Sultanate administration system. Today, time is over. Next class, continue to tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Bye. Thank you.